that class yesterday?
What?
After that class yesterday?
Yeah, after that class.
Very good dominance.
What? Yeah. All right. I'm going to go back a little bit so that we have a complete continuity. We'll start on the bottom of page 102. Does the copying machine work? That explains that the Avodah of Birurim, there is involved an aspect of Milchama. The concept of Milchama means that you have to actually stand up to the Nefesh Abamis, relate to it, understand where it is, and weaken it and subdue it to the point where the Nefesh Abamis begins to see, essentially the behemoth becomes human. That's essentially what it is. Begins to understand the human qualities, values. Yeah.
If you start writing,
I don't know if we should have.
if you start writing in the middle of a page, should you put the base on dollar where you stop?
No, it's not. And this requires that one should actually delve into, get into, and get involved in things in that level where the Nefesh HaBahamis itself is involved in, and there deal with it and show the right way from the wrong way, and reflect on it, and be misboinen, as he says, as we discussed the other day. Hisboinenus means that you enter into the subject not just for the purpose of knowing it, but for the purpose of relating to it. Reflect on it and say, okay, well, that's a reality. That's hisboinenus. One can know what's doing in this room, but entering into the room is a different experience. That's hisboinenus. The Rebbe explains that an Avodah Protis, that a specific Avodah, meaning specific Avodah, is that level of Avodah that has an actual effect, where it's not merely, again, knowing about something, but actually affecting it. That's specific. And the specific Avodah has to be in inyonim, in such aspects that the Nefesh HaBaham is to identify where the Nefesh HaBaham is, where one's tendency is. And as we mentioned the other day, that once we confront ourselves, we get shocked to identify the qualities that we find. The selfishness, the falseness. We don't even notice it in normal circumstances. But when we start examining ourselves, and we see that this is what's preventing us, what's standing in the way for us to understand a true union, or relating to godliness. And that's why we have to deal with it. That's what he says here. We have to identify the faults of his nefesh on the bottom line of page 102. The kolechot v'yechot, because every individual, and this is important to know, that every individual, without exception, has these chisroinei hanefesh habahamis, and therefore every individual has to deal with it. It's not something that would say, okay, I am such and such, how can I admit it? Everyone, and if you're honest, that's where it is. It is, you have to confront yourself and identify the faults and deal with them. This is what makes us. This is what builds us up. This is what makes human beings out of us. This confrontation. And if we don't confront ourselves, we are lying to ourselves, and we continue to lie to everybody else. And the biggest fool and the biggest sufferer is ourselves. The kolechot v'yechot, because everyone had a yesh le inyonim protim. He has specific inyonim protim. In this case, does not mean specific only; it means private, that are unique to him. Hein inyonim anoigim b'moichin. There are two types. Whether they be inyonim that relate to moichin, relate to the intellect, v'hein inyonim hanoigim b'midas, and likewise inyonim, aspects that relate to midas. And as we started discussing last time, that inyonim that relate to moichin are much more serious than inyonim that relate to midas. Inyonim that relate to moichin are very difficult to confront, very difficult to deal with. But the moichin, the mind, that is the basis of the human being. How he perceives himself, how he perceives the world, how he perceives the purpose of the world and God. That's moichin. And moichin, it's possible for a person to go through life and just fit in, what's called fit into society, fit into the structure that he found comfortable. Fit. Right. Let's give you an example. I met people, they're looking for a place to live. They got married, they have a family, comfortable place to live where they find it comfortable. So there are people who look for a place to live where there is a lot of shiurim, where Yiddishkeit is emphasized. Oh, that's a good place for me. There are people who look for a place to live where people don't mix into your life. Live and let live. So live and let live, that's a principle. Of course we have to let people live. But the reason he runs over there is because he does not want to confront himself. He doesn't want to take on responsibility. Clearly, a person should not be living a Jewish life because of social pressure. One has to live a Jewish life because he believes in it, he understands it, he relates to it. There's no question about it. But if one understands the importance of it, he is going to look for means by which he's going to be pressured to increase. Even though it's a pressure, but that's what he's going to be looking for, because he wants to see if he can do it himself. So maybe this environment will help me. So it's a pressure, but he's selecting to have that pressure. If he selects to be away from that pressure, nobody wants pressure. Midas wise, so to speak, we understand. But on the other hand, it means that he does not really appreciate the value. That's moichi. That means that he really is in a compromising state of mind. He doesn't really understand the value of true life. He wants a comfortable life. A comfortable means without pressure, without duty, without obligation and responsibility. But what is life? That was, he's missing a moichin quality. He's missing a sense of intellectual identity and value. That one has to confront. And this is part of the various Nefesh Abamis problems. Shehei machoivav haruchniyim haproti. These are his haprotim. Protim here again actually means his private and personally unique machoiv. Machoiv means sicknesses. The word machoiv literally means sickness. And in fact, this is his sickness. That's to give you an illustration of this and how it is a sickness. Something that we know we can relate to, because this is not so far-fetched. Let's say on a minimal level, there are kids, a child who is excited to go to school. And when he Chas v'Sholom gets sick, he's unhappy. Then there's a kid who does not want to go to school. And if he has an excuse, if he has 100 fever, which is minimal, and the doctors and everybody says, no, it's okay. And he is happy if he can stay in bed and not go to school. So that's a childish thing. But if we examine this and go a little further and understand the mind, the power, the human power behind it, we understand that this is really a negative quality. One should never want to be sick, for no excuse. There's things which I have to do. That's what I have to do. If it's not pleasant, I have to do it. That is a machoiv. And one has to examine himself and know, all these kind of machoiv. Kefi asher yoda inish benafshoy. And translate the word kefi, according to asher yoda, that is known inish to a person benafshoy, in his own nefesh, in his own soul. This is something which is unique to every person, and only he himself can identify these machoivim. Nobody can identify them. Ve'ein odom yoideya ma beliva shel chaveri. For another person cannot know what is going on in the heart of his neighbor, of his chaver. It is absolutely possible for a person to, we call it in America, we call it the con artist. A con artist is a person who can present a very perfectly honest and responsible presentation, and he's completely false inside. So he is presenting himself and he's going through, and everybody thinks that he's a fine person. But if he doesn't stop to think that the real victim over here is he himself. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you something that I'm involved in for years. There's a young man who is a medical doctor. And he went through college and he got his medical degree. He went through college, he got his degree, never did a stitch of work. He was able always to finagle. You know what finagle is? Get himself out of a difficult situation. And he got his degree. He doesn't know a thing. I mean, he knows, minimal thing, not a doctor. He doesn't have the sense of what it means to be a doctor. And he got through. And you know something? I'm working with him for years. He is suffering something terrible. He has to, at an advanced stage, at an adult stage, a point where he's responsible already, has to confront himself and change himself over from inside out. Because his whole life he was lying. He was lying to himself, he was lying to others. This is the fact. I'm working with him. And the whole problem is that he is so used to lying that he doesn't even know when he's lying. It's a horrible thing. These are machoivim that one has to be aware. Hey, wait a second. The fact that he doesn't know that you have a problem doesn't mean that you don't have a problem. You're the one who has to know the problem. Because you are the one, first of all, in terms of Avodas Hashem, you have to be true in Avodas Hashem. And in terms of your future life, you have to know that you have a real, you're for real.
So from Moichin?
This is only Moichin. This inyan of not facing up to the truth is a Moichin problem. Because the Moichin, this is the whole person says, listen, there has to be a reality in life. Is life for real, or is it a game? The lepiyomim, and this is what the Rebbe says over here. Lepiyomim, it is conceivable. Occasionally, it's possible. Hine yesh, that there is a situation that the human person yeshlich isronei v'tachluya hanefesh, that he has shortcoming. A sodom is a shortcoming, and tachluya means achmonos on sickness, a nefesh sickness. Superficially, you don't see he's perfectly healthy, but it's a nefesh sickness. Masha zulosoi is such a thing that zulosoi, anyone else other than himself, lo yuchal klal l'shayr, cannot even imagine. This means l'shayr. Couldn't even begin to imagine asher hu nimtzo b'maimed nafshi, that he is in a spiritual state, gorua kozeh, in such a low spiritual state. Someone else couldn't even imagine it. And thus, what does a person do? Clearly, one has to confront himself. But how does one confront himself? Okay, so I have this situation. How do I get out? What do I do with it? This is what the Rebbe says. Ube'ezat tefillah, in time of davening. Tzorich lachshev. This is the time when one has to consider and reflect. Binyonei chesrei neisov, in yonim of his own shortcomings. Why is this a time in tefillah to reflect on the Yonichas Lineisov, you would think that in davening, we know a cloud that davening one has to come b'simcha. Why is this the time to think of Yonichas Lineisov? The answer is, as we discussed yesterday, davening is the time that we recognize, that we realize that actually the whole world is permeated and is and represents and has a godly strength, godly quality. So that when a person reflects of his own chesronos, his own shortcomings, in davening, he realizes two things. I have a chison, but the reality, the truth, Hashem is not. It doesn't have a chison. In other words, I have the support, and I have the strength, but I have to know that I have get the strength from Hashem. All I have to do is face up to these chisronos, and then I will say, okay, I don't need to be false because Hashem is going to give me support to come out of it. This is why it's related to davening. If one thinks about it, other times it's just going to depress him, because what is he going to do with it? Where is he going to get the strength to break out of it? Whatever the concern is. In davening, when he reflects, this is the time when he comes close to Hashem, and this is the time when he realizes that his closeness and the complete closeness and permeation of Hashem's presence. This is the time when he reflects, I was closing myself off from Hashem. Now I'm going to come out because I'm not afraid to come out. Because the truth is that this is this is not what I am. I don't have to be false. I have a reality. I have a true life. The true life comes from Hashem. All I have to do is accept it and recognize it and not lock myself out of it. This is why davening is the opportune time to confront oneself. During davening, instead of throwing him into depression, it's going to uplift him. Because he's going to realize, but there's real life. There's real strength behind it. But if he doesn't confront himself, he's going to be lying to himself, either doing davening too. Okay, this is what he says. During davening, he has to and to suffer over them. The smarmer, what marmer comes from merirus, bitter. In other words, to be bitter over them. In other words, to suffer of them and to actually feel the bitterness and feel the pain for having these chisronos. And then he has to explain to the nefesh habamis, meaning he has to explain to himself and reflect clearly. He has to go in as far as he can go to explain to himself how lowly this is. Pchitus means lowly. What kind of low state this is. Where as a result of this and through this process, the whole essence, the whole essence of the nefesh habamis becomes purified. This mizdachech becomes purified. It becomes refined. And then the nefesh habamis will also be able to understand and to relate to a godly concept, hasoga lekis. What is a godly concept in the context that we are discussing? Everything that we discussed yesterday, everything that is mentioned in the davening, it's all a godly concept. If we recognize that Hashem is the one that when a behemoth or a wild beast goes in the field and finds its prey, so you could say, oh, it found its prey, it's an accident. Or you could say, no, this is proof that the world is being supplied, it is being supervised. There's a godly presence. So the Nefesh Abamis on its own cannot see it. He sees only the physical environment. And inside the physical environment, oh, it's an accident. The wolf was running or the lion was running and he saw a sheep and he caught a sheep. We once discussed quite a while ago that every animal, every creature in the world, except for the serpent, has a sense that his food comes from someplace. Doesn't understand that it comes from God, but it comes from someplace. In other words, he has some kind of a relation, some kind of sense of the rest, the big world. The serpent, he was thrown down on his belly, like we discussed one time. You know what I'm referring to? That after the Chet is Hadas, after the Chet is Hadas, the serpent was punished, was cursed. What was the curse of the serpent? That he lost his legs, he was thrown down to walk on his belly. And he says, "Ofer Teichen, you will eat dust." That's what Hashem said to him that was his curse. So I asked, what kind of curse is this? It's a blessing, it's not a curse. Remember that? Every animal is afraid that he'll fall down. He stands on feet, he can fall down. A bird can hit a tree, can fall down. Even an animal that stands on 4 legs, which is safe, but still he can trip and fall. A human being is the most vulnerable of all. He stands erect, and he is the most vulnerable to falling down from everything in the world. And the same thing, food. The serpent is not afraid of falling down. He can't fall. His whole belly on the ground. No way he can get hurt. Huh?
As low as it gets.
It's not a question of low. He's safe. He's absolutely safe. He's got no fear of hurting himself. Food, every animal has to look for its food someplace. Serpent doesn't have to look for its food. Wherever he goes, it's right there. So what kind of curse is this? That's the curse. It says, Rashi brings down, if you take a look in the Chumash, Rashi brings down that the serpent, in fact, was telling Chava, he said, you think God is so great? God ate from the Eitz Hadas, and that's how you created the world. What is the point? What's behind it? The point behind it, the serpent was jealous of God himself. He wants to be as great and as independent as God. You want to be independent, so God said, okay, here it is. You go down in your belly, and you eat dust. And you have no connection to God whatsoever. Every animal has to go out and start screaming, where's my food? Running, looking, but he's alive. He relates to God unbeknownst to him, so to speak. And as a matter of fact, You know, it says that the birds sing praise to Hashem, and all animals, it has to do with Hashem. It's meant to Hashem not because they understand what Hashem is, but just the sense of infinity, the sense of greatness they all experience it, except for the serpent. This is why the serpent is an interesting thing. The serpent, who is the most safe and secure, is also the most vicious and the most jealous and venomous. You would think if he's so safe and secure, he should be the most fragile. The answer is because he is detached, he is broken away from Hashem, so he's got nothing. He is the most bitter. He's got nothing to his life. So in order to understand and to recognize the Hashem's presence in the world, Hashem's presence in his life, the Nefesh Abamis has to be mizdachek, has to be purified, has to be elevated from the serpentine level. The Nefesh Abamis by nature tends downwards. He wants to go to the place where the serpent is. And he's constantly drawing further down. And you explain to them, where are you going? That's not where you want to go. You have to refine yourself and start looking upwards. And appreciate and recognize that if you have difficulty in life, and you have to ask Hashem for help, hey, that's a blessing. That's not a curse. The curse is when you fall down and you have everything and you don't have a sense at all that there is something greater. That's a curse. That's the worst curse of all. We know in our human experience here in America, there are young people growing up in affluent means wealthy homes, lacking nothing. I mean, really wealthy, some wealth over here, it could be, you can't even imagine the wealth that exists. And these kids are so unhappy to the point where they, Rahman al-San, commit suicide. You know what suicide means? They take their lives, they kill themselves. That's how unhappy they become. Not because wealth is not a good thing. Wealth is a wonderful thing, but you have to know how to use it. To rely on the wealth, like the serpent relies on his belly, that's not a life for a human being. It's not life. So we have to elevate the Nefesh Abamis and refine it and tell him, yes, you're a behemoth, but you also have to know that you're a human behemoth. You have to follow direction and try to understand what life is about. This is what this avoiding tefillah is. Tefillah, one has to go through the whole process and recognize and experience and davening. Yes, indeed, this is God's world. And then he said the Nefesh Abamis is capable to actually accept a godly concept. Now the Rebbe explains, how is the Nefesh Abamis? He's a behemoth. How is he going to accept a godly concept? Hasoga lekis. understand godliness? So he explains. The nefesh habahamis, because the nefesh habahamis in itself, hagam shehu seichel, although that it is really seichel. This we have to understand that even though we call it nefesh habahamis, a behemoth, but there is a reason why it's called a behemoth, because of its tendencies we'll discuss. But really, it's a human nefesh habahamis. It's not the nefesh habahamis of a behemoth, it's the nefesh habahamis of a human being. A human being, on the very basic level, even on the behemoth level, is a sichli. He has a seichel. What does a sichli mean? What does seichel mean? We discussed this many times. Seichel does not only mean that he can figure out 2 times 2 equals to 4. As a matter of fact, I once explained that this even a behemoth can figure out. I remember that's not what seichel is. And the seichel is also not that he knows how to get from Seagate to Crown Heights. A cat can also find its way to Crown Heights. That's not what it is. And birds fly southward and northward, and they find their way. Seichel, what distinguishes a human being from an animal, is that a human being, even the nefesh habahamis of a human being, recognizes the presence and the reality of the world in his mind. The behemoth does not know in its mind that there is a world. The behemoth knows only because it feels it, touches it. When it's hungry, he knows that there is a world. When he sees another animal attacking him, he knows that there's another animal. It doesn't have a conception. It doesn't conceptualize a world existence. A human being knows things in his mind. That's what his seichel is. His mind tells him that there is a world. And that seichel is true in the nefesh habahamis too. His nefesh habahamis also has awareness that there is a reality. Not because he experiences it, but because he recognizes the reality of it. And once, to illustrate this, you with me? To illustrate this opinion that a person is aware in his mind, and he defines the world by his seichel rather than by his experience. This is a common illustration that we use many times. That when we enter a hall of a simcha, a chasana, and there's tables set up, and there's chairs and tables and food, the whole setup. What does a human being notice? Does he notice the food? Is that what he identifies with? Oh, there is food. No. Oh, there's a simcha. Something going on, a special event. What does a cat see? Food.
Things in the way.
What?
Things in the way of the cat and the food.
Yeah, there's nothing. He can't. There's no concept. There's no intangible. He can only relate to the tangible. A human being sees things from a conceptual perception. That's seichel. And the nefesh habahamis also has seichel. A behemoth, Taki, does not have seichel. I mean, it has the seichel of the behemoth is entirely on the physical level. Like we said, he can find his way. He can identify. This is a fire, it's hot, so he runs away. He doesn't go into fire. That's not what we mean by seichel. Seichel means that the whole world is defined to him. What is the reality of the world is that which his seichel defines to him as real. It's not the tables and chairs, it's the simcha that becomes real. A person who comes into a simcha, to a chasana, and he says, there is food, you say, hey, are you a human being? Where is your seichel? Right? Where is your seichel? You don't see what's going on? No, I don't see. What do you see? I see tables and chairs. Which is right. He's absolutely correct. He sees tables and chairs. This is the same thing as saying, what we are broader saying, I see a big ball, a fireball, sun, and I see a moon, nothing else. But you don't see that there is a whole cycle. You don't see that a reality is going on. No, I don't see it. I see it's all physical. That's how the Nefesh HaBahamis, that's where the Nefesh HaBahamis needs to be taught. To see godliness in the world. But he has to be refined first. He has to be true to himself. To be able to really recognize this. So he has seichel. And he's able to understand and to see that there is glory and greatness going on in the world. Just as able to see that there is greatness going on in Asimcha. But we have to refine him first. Take him out of his coarseness, of his lowliness. He's preoccupied with his own things, with his coarseness. He's not going to see it. The sun rises automatically, the moon comes automatically. I don't care. All I want to know is how can I enjoy it? Not what it stands for, what it means, what it represents. And this is the work that we have to do to bring the Nefesh HaBahamis to recognize what's going on. So that's what he said. The Nefesh HaBahamis, Hagam Shehu Seichel. Nefesh HaBahamis, although it is really Seichel, so Zeho HaHefreish Ben HaYetzer Hora. But this is the difference. Huh? Yeah.
It's a form of seichel.
It's a form of seichel, right. It's a seichel. Nefesh HaBahamis is seichel. In other words, even though he knows things like a behem, like you say, on a lower level, we'll discuss this later, but he knows it with seichel, not by just experiment.
It's being though it's a form of seichel.
Yeah. Like I explained, what does he know? How does he know the world? Through his seichel, not through his experiment. That's when Nefesh HaBahamis is seichel. No, but that's the reality. But as we're going to see, he knows a certain level of the seichel. But he is seichel. V'zehu ha'hefresh, where this is the difference between ha'yetzer hora shu midos, the difference between the yetzer hora, which is midos, v'nefesh HaBahamis shu seichel. The difference between the yetzer hora and nefesh HaBahamis. You know, we always speak about there's nefesh HaBahamis and the yetzer hora. What's the difference? And this is the difference. Nefesh HaBahamis, this is the seichel of the nefesh HaBahamis, and the yetzer hora, this is the midos. Now, what is the difference between seichel and midos? Just like in our experience, what is seichel? Seichel and midos. Seichel allows a person to investigate, to figure out what does it look like, what is the reason for this, what is the reason for that. Seichel is not a blanket thing that it takes things just the way they are. He can go deeper and figure out and have arguments in one direction, arguments in another direction. Seichel is pliable, so he can go in he can extend beyond its immediate moment. Midos is how I feel at this moment. Midos don't have the discerning, this research quality. I like it, I don't like it. That's Midos. Midos don't even care to say, I like it because. I just like it. Or I dislike it. The because is already seichel. Midas don't care about the whole concept of why. Maybe he can change. No, I like it. I don't like it. I want it. I don't want it. That's what Midas are.
You said Midas is this one, yeah?
What? Yeah.
So Midas is happening by Chachma bin Adas?
No, Midas is not Chachma. Midas is
Not
Chesed.
Midas, I mean Seichel.
Seichel is Chachma bin Adas.
Midas is Chesed.
So, Seichel is a completely different quality. Seichel is that when a person can approach something and examine it and identify the good and the bad in it. That's what Seichel is. And this is the difference between Nefesh HaBahamis and the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, this is where a person is confronted with Yetzer Hara. So that's what we call the Yetzer Hara. Be very angry at the Yetzer Hara. Because the Yetzer Hara comes to a person and draws him to want something that really has no meaning at all to want it. But that's what I want. And you can't argue, I want it. You can't even argue with it. That's Midas. This is why, one way to deal with the Yetzer Hara is to avoid circumstances, avoid places where the Yetzer Hara wakes up. Because the Yetzer Hara doesn't want things that he doesn't see. He sees, I want. He doesn't see, he doesn't want. It actually, mamash acts like a behemoth. It reacts to moments. And then, of course, we are human beings and we don't have to give in to Yetzer Hara. We have to fight it, and we are able to fight it because the mind is more powerful than the heart. But we're fighting it. It's not that we can explain to the Yetzer Hara, that's not a good thing to want. He doesn't. There's no one to talk to, nobody home. And Nefesh HaBahamis, on the other hand, is a sichli. With him, he can do, at that level, he can deal with it. And as I said, even to the point where if we refine the Nefesh HaBahamis, we can have the Nefesh HaBahamis be able to relate to a Seichel Eliki, to understand a godly concept, and see godliness in the world. So that's what he says here. And he says, however, however, Haseichel the Nefesh HaBahamis hu Seichel HaTivi. The Seichel the Nefesh HaBahamis is Seichel HaTivi, which means the natural Seichel, Seichel of nature. And what is Seichel of nature? Like we said, that Seichel is capable of figuring things out. What is this and what is this? Is this good or is this not good, and so forth. But then the limit of the Seichel of Nefesh HaBahamis, even though it's Seichel, but it's limited to Teva, nature. What's his Teva?
It's like programmed.
No, he's programmed.
Like you're here, it's like a natural response, kind of.
Well, a natural response is not Seichel. Because that's what you say Seichel. Seichel means that he has a choice. If he doesn't have a choice, a natural response, that's midas, right? He has no. Menasse is seichel, which means that his response is premeditated. Premeditated. I mean, that's what meditated is. He thinks, he decides to do it. Not he is forced to do it, he decides to do it. Or he decides not to do it. That's what a seichel is. In other words, that's what you explained before. That seichel means I know the thing without being involved in it, without touching it. And before I touch it, I decide, should I touch it or not touch it. That's seichel.
You call it rational behavior?
Rational behavior, that depends of how he uses his seichel. We're talking about the power of seichel itself that Nefesh Abamis has.
And like it rationalizes things.
You are relating to another aspect of seichel. Try to stick to this one. Trying to focus in. Seichel is the. You know what I'm saying? Seichel is the ability. I've been saying before, the human ability to perceive and conceptualize. You know what conceptualize means? The existence of the world without touching it. I know that there's a table over here. Why? Because my hand stops? No, I know it. What's the seichel? Everybody understands this? So the Nefesh Abamis has seichel, and therefore, since Nefesh Abamis has seichel, he is able to really understand the intangible, and therefore, l'choire, it would seem that he should be able to understand godliness. He says, no, that's not. You have to be after his dachus, after purification, he's capable, but on its own, no.
What's something untangible it can understand? Like table is tangible then.
No.
No?
The table is tangible, but he doesn't know it because of its tangibility.
Okay.
Because it affected him, he touched it. He knows it's real because he knows it's real. You understand? Like I said before, we go into a chasana and you see that there's a whole affair going on. Even though there are tangible things that indicate it, but what are you relating to? You're relating to the intangible. You understand? This is a very important factor in human life. But one has to relate and to understand what is going on on a human level, not just in the tangible level. How do we relate? People have to relate on a human level. Understand how people feel, how people react, right and wrong on the human level, not on the tangible level. That's primary, so to speak, in terms of a human being, and that's primary in Seichel Nefesh Abamis too. But there is a limit in the Seichel Nefesh Abamis, and that's what Rebbe says here. Avol ha-seichel, the nefesh habamis, is seichel hativi. However, there is a limit to that seichel. The seichel of nefesh habamis is seichel hativi, is a natural seichel. Ve'enoi shayach, and he cannot relate. Ve'enoi chofetz, and he doesn't even want. Lahasig hasoga lekis. He doesn't have a tendency, doesn't have an inclination to understand a godly TV, yes, and it's real seichel, but not godly. This elaboration on this Indian seichel TV, seichel eleki, we'll have to leave for next time because I don't want to shortchange. I want to have all the time I need for this.
The Yitzhak doesn't even have the potential of the things.
Of seichel, no.
Nothing.
So what's the difference between not to have the potential or to have the seichel but not wanting any? Oh, okay.
So the idea is, by being Nidvarn and thinking about these things in the mind, the seichel, that's going to necessarily eventually lead to controlling the midos. And do you want to say that when it comes just to the level of the Yetzer Hara, the midos, it's difficult, extremely difficult, or it could be dealt with? Also, is this the main way of controlling the Yetzer Hara, as opposed to not that you want to say that you're not able to be dealt with if push comes to shove, let's say on its own level? What is that?
There are two distinct inyanim. We are learning the inyan now. I think it's been explained about the Nefesh Abamis and Yetzer Hara and so forth. How this applies to the individual person. How am I going to control my Yetzer Hara? That's a separate thing. Okay? Maybe we can employ that which we're learning here, but first we have to understand the concept itself.
Got it.